I'm a real field and I'm an expert in AI. And I say that loosely because aren't we all experts these days? I work with the UK government, military, and the legal profession in looking at AI software and building it, reverse engineering it, and working on best practice with it. I've currently got a textbook that will be coming out soon that's going to detail novel best practice in AI. I've got professional accreditation through the Institute of Science and Technology that helps professionals in AI become accredited, and I also deliver a lot of training courses, which is where a lot of the questions that I'm answering are coming from right now. So, what I want to do today is have a look at the TEDx talk by Mustafa Suleyman and see exactly what he's got to say about AI. So, we're going to do a few reaction videos to see what people are saying about AI at the minute. So it's important to understand first that AI is basically maths and statistics. It's just more complex. So there's a few extra pieces in there. So everything that I'm saying today, you can have a look at my papers on ResearchGate or Google Scholar for more explanation. But we started off with very, very simple packages that you could go in and you could click a button and you could say, I want to do this complex parameter test, which is quite theoretical on this data, and then you could get a result. What we're doing now is we're building more complex models that are things like chatbots or service integration with, I don't know, government services or prediction models or insurance models, and they are just more of the same. The only difference is that there's now computer software, cybersecurity, there's lots of different subject matter experts that need to be involved, and they directly impact humans. So things like Horizon, that was computer software. And the way that we describe AI is very loose. So we could say that these basic statistical models are AI, we could say machine learning is AI, data science could be AI, or AI could be something like Skynet that doesn't exist yet. So it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint what this is. So what I want you to kind of bear in mind as we go through this is I'm using the term AI is just a more complex statistical model with a few more people in the development process. And obviously that is complex and that needs unpacking, but we'll do that in another video. What we'll do right now is we'll start with Mustafa Suleyman and see what he's got to say on his TEDx talk. So, where he starts with this is communication is key to understand what it is that we're building. And it is important to understand and to be able to communicate that and to be able to explain it. Now, what I can't understand is why he's saying that we're not able to do that. We are able to do that. We've got best practice that shows us how to do that. We can build transparent models. We've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. And if you follow the correct processes, then you can explain that. So I'm not really sure why he can't. The next point that he makes in this piece is about AI as a new thing. It's clearly not a new thing. It's based on hundreds of years of theory and methodology that we've got in statistics and mathematics, and that is used to build models that affect society, things that go on. So if you want to apply for an insurance product, if you want to apply for a finance product, there's some automated decision making in there. And that's really the kind of next step from the statistical models, because before we used to interpret the output in them and then make discretionary decisions. Now we're kind of bolting on automated decision making to whatever comes out the other end. Now, you can probably see the danger in that, that there is a real risk that if there's automated decision making, then maybe we might get that wrong because the interpretation can be really, really difficult in some of these models. And it really does depend what data you've put in at the beginning in order to be able to make these decisions. And the data can be wrong, the processing can be wrong, there can be elements of the coding in the model that are just slightly off, which means that the result's off. So that means that any automated decision making on the back end can fail. And we've seen that multiple times in kind of legal cases, court cases, um, Horizon, keep going back to that one. That's a recent big one. And that's the reason that there's just been a call for evidence by the UK government on the use of software in criminal cases, because actually software is used quite a lot to convict people, but it's never analysed, and it's not analysed in the way that it should be in terms of the forensic digital regulator and in terms of best practice. So this software can go into court and it can be used to make decisions, but actually it may not be working correctly. It might be a load of rubbish. It might never have been looked at properly. And that's actually really quite scary. And that's some of the things that I'm seeing at the minute in my work. One of the other things that he goes on to say is, and it's interesting that he says that he's really concerned about the ethics. Because if he's really concerned about the ethics, I'm not sure why he wants AI to be a partner in our journey and to what extent he expects that to happen. If he's expecting that it's going to be like a spell check, then fair enough. That's something, that we can automate. We've been doing for a while. It's not particularly dangerous. We've had a lot of testing done on that. That seems reasonable. If he's saying that it's going to be a partner in our journey and it's going to be a therapist or a personal companion, then that brings with it a lot of risk and a lot of danger. And what that can do is it can manipulate vulnerable people, socially isolated people. It can manipulate people in general. And if you look at my research, it's really easy to do this with things like social media, internet marketing, AI decision making. It's really easy to manipulate people by doing that. So I'm not sure that an AI that's being built by a company that has profit as a primary metric should really be being used in that kind of circumstance, because the aim would be to keep the person within that AI or that app in order to make more money, which could be manipulative. And this is another problem that I'm seeing a lot of. Companies will not disclose their IP. They're hiding behind IP issues to say, well, we're not going to tell you how it works. We're not going to be transparent because actually that violates our IP and that's how we make money. So immediately you've got a conflict where a company is trying to make money off you using this product, but they're not prepared to tell you the risks or how it works. So say you're using ChatGPT. That sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like, it's going to do the work for you and you're not going to have to, think too much about, planning an itinerary or trying to make a template document. But ChatGPT in itself is not an intelligent tool. It's scraping a set of data, and from that set of data, it's going to work on the most popular type of result and then give you that. And that's not going to be necessarily tailored to you. It's going to kind of converge into the most popular viewpoint, which means that you're not going to get anything particularly original out of it. And the dangerous part of it is it sucks in your data. And as soon as you've put something in there, it's gone. The company owns it, it can sell it, it can do what it wants with it because it's in its training data set now. So say you want to get a financial plan and you think, well, I'll not pay for a financial planner. I'll go and use ChatGPT. That will give me a really good financial plan for my retirement. Great. So you've put all your financial details into ChatGPT and you don't know where they're going. You don't know what the risk is. You don't know if they're going to be sold. You don't know if the company will be bought and then the data will go with that company. You don't know what's going to happen. Now, if I type into ChatGPT, can you give me an example of uploaded financial data or company contracts that have been put in there or something? ChatGPT may well give me that data because, again, it's not an intelligent system. It's just going to give you what's in there. So you've got to be extremely careful. Once you put something into the internet, it's gone, and it can be used, it can be brought back, it can be sold, it can be exploited, it can be used to manipulate you, it can be used to build a profile on you, and that profile can be sold, and that's how you get targeted marketing, targeted emails, um, manipulation, exploitation, that type of thing. So I'm kind of concerned at this kind of point why the ethics is not something that's more what he's talking about and why he's more kind of concentrated on the technology. And potentially to me, he's saying, well, I've actually built this in my last company. It's great. He's not going to stand on a TEDx stage and tell you all the risks. He's going to tell you how good it is. And then if something goes wrong, we'll go to court. And then what does it really matter by that point? We've kind of made the money. We can all move on, etc. It's not looking like the ethics and the risks are being taken particularly seriously. Now, the other side of that is if they gave you 500 pages of terms and conditions and risks, are you going to read it? People don't, read this. They haven't got the time, they don't want to, it's boring. And realistically, if you did read it, you probably wouldn't use it. So it's out of sight, out of mind. I want to do what everyone else is doing. I want to be part of what this is. I want to be part of the hype. I want to try and make my life easier because let's face it, we've, not got a lot of time anymore. Everything's really busy. We want tools that make that easier. But why not concentrate on things that actually do make your life easier, like apps that might pull out travel plans and put you together, all your information in one place so that you've got all your tickets, your itinerary, copy it onto your calendar so you know where you're going, um, give you some prices of how much things are going to cost, tell you how much the currency is, etc. Give you some sort of useful output or process your financial transactions. So I've got these receipts. Can you automatically attach them to the ledger entry? Can you reconcile that, etc.? Can you do that for me? That's going to save me a lot of hours per week. But is that going to generate as much money as if you give the general public a tool that they can then pay for and use, and it's easier to manipulate people into using that and getting more data that is way more valuable than potentially reconciling receipts? It's probably more useful to get all the data to be able to market to you more. So there are a lot of issues with everything that we're unpacking within all these different pieces of information that we're getting. But we'll continue to do that and we will see where we get with this video. So let's go on to the next piece. So Mustafa here is making some really strong claims and he's really labouring the point as to why this is honest and accurate and we should believe him. Um, but actually, what is he claiming here? He's saying that we should prepare for and shape what's coming. Now, there's several problems with this statement. How can we prepare for this when actually it's industry that's driving it and they are keeping everything behind a gateway so that people can't see what they're actually doing? And how can we shape this? So there's more issues to unpack within this. Where standards and legislation and regulation are being built, there isn't a huge amount of input from the general public. And there are issues with this because citizen literacy for AI is not taught formally in the UK, and that's because there isn't a formal curriculum to teach or assess this. So provision is inconsistent, which means that the ability to question or shape this is limited. Now, the people building the regulation and legislation also suffer from this issue because there hasn't been this formalized teaching and learning process. People have generally been teaching themselves or taking up inconsistent courses. There's been no real quality, mark on the provision. So how do we know how good it is? Some of the people that are building this regulation and legislation don't really work with AI, but they're trying to be involved in it. So what you have is a group of people which may well have a lot of industry representation in it, and industry is going to have one motive, government will have another motive, citizen literacy and protection will have another motive. But there isn't a huge amount of citizen protection in there. There isn't a huge amount of safety. There isn't a huge amount of ethics. Professional bodies in the UK are generally left out of this process as well. So there are groups of experts within statistics, mathematics, computer science that should be being consulted in this work but aren't. So what you then see is the shaping of this future being done to enable profit and to enable industry to capitalize on what this is. And going back to Mustafa's earlier point about how we communicate what AI is, because the definitions are so vague and because ethics is attached, ethics is generally something that is an extremely vague concept. So it's really easy to kind of, wash that out and kind of say, well, ethics, that can be anything. But the communication part of that is we need to know what are the ethics that are fundamental to AI building, and that comes out of best practice. What is the best practice for building this stuff? And that's fundamental to being able to build it. And communicating what we're actually doing is key. And what we can't keep saying is this is Terminator, this is Skynet, because it isn't. What it is it's systems that are sat there that are making decisions on you every day, whether you know it or not, and you have very little opportunity to challenge these. So there are things like GDPR and the ICO, etc., but they're not going to take on individual cases. That's going to end up in a court of law, and people aren't just going to generally say, right, I'm going to go to court on this because they're fighting big industry. And if big industry is shaping the future of this, then what kind of possibility will there be for people to say, I'm not happy with this, I don't want this to happen? And we have to put that into the context of a lot of this has already happened. A lot of data is already stored on the internet. A lot of it's been scraped already. There are lots of things going on with deep fakes and manipulation. And what do you do with that? Do you regulate and legislate the entire internet? And if you do that, how do you do it globally? So we've gone a little bit too far to actually go back and sort out what's happened, and we're at a point where the shaping and the preparation is not being done by the people that should be involved. So citizen safety, citizen literacy, education, keeping people safe. What about the privacy aspects? What about the security aspects? These are the things that we need to know about. What we have now is a standoff between people building the fundamental technology in academia and people building these solutions, AI models, etc., software out in industry. And there's a clash because we haven't got an objective build of systems because we haven't got an objective novel methodology and best practice for this discipline, which is what I'm putting into my textbook. But that's not there right now. And so that's allowed a lot of this development to happen without really any oversight. And even if we look at standards that are coming out of, the UK government in Europe, they are going to be nowhere near fast enough to come in. And even if they do, because of who they have been built by and who is on those teams, they may well not be fit for purpose. And the upshot of that for AI practitioners is they may well be the people that are held to account by these regulations, legislations, and standards, despite the fact that they were never formally educated in the first place to be able to understand what these new standards, regulation, legislation are, and to adhere to them, or to have the correct modeling teams or the correct processes to use, but the penalties will come to the business regardless, if that even happens, because bear in mind what we said before, we've still got industry sat on these panels and advising government standards and regulation and legislation. So we're in a real mess at the minute in terms of where are the ethics? Because if profit is driving this whole thing and it's just a capitalist exercise and there's no kind of there's very limited involvement from the ethical standpoint of keeping people safe and not doing things just because we can, doing them because they serve a purpose and they've been tested and they are appropriate, then what we're doing is damaging society in the long term, and we're not putting in any safeguards to try and stop that happening. Now, we can sit there all day and we can say, these are the fundamental definitions of words. This is the statistical methodology where, how you build this. That's great, but what's the oversight? What's the quality check? What's the transparency? When people are being put in prison because of this software and people are losing family members because of software, where is the oversight? And even though Horizon happened a long time ago now, we still haven't got anything in place to say software should be analysed in court cases. What we've got is the just general understanding that actually, why are we not trusting this software in the first place? Because all software is trustworthy. And that's really concerning. And I was really concerned when I saw that on the call for evidence because that's not what should be happening. Every single piece of evidence should be analysed. I wouldn't kind of walk into a court and say, I've got this gun and it's proves that this happened, but I'm not going to let you look at it. I'm not going to let you forensically examine it. You've just got to take my word on it. But that's essentially what's happening with this software. A company for profit has built this software and they've taken it into court, and the court said, well, we should trust this. No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't trust any software. We shouldn't trust anything until it's been properly tested. We should have evidence that this works, it is safe, it's been independently assured before we even take that anywhere near using it in a way that's going to affect people. So let's look at the next piece. Yeah, Sullivan's point here. So he's saying that if a human read for their entire life, they will consume X amount, but an AI can consume far more than that. Um, for why? A human will go and research and read and experience a lot of things out in the world through their five senses. They will have experience. They will be able to make decisions based on that. There's a very big difference between what it is to be human and what it is to be a machine. And you can kind of read that in the philosophy books because we we consume content, but we don't consume the content in order to be able to do what AI does. What he might be talking about there is a large language model that's going to vacuum in trillions of books and then start regurgitating things. So the example of maybe, can you write me a Shakespeare sonnet as if it was a techno song or something like that? Yeah, it might be able to do that to an extent. But the problem is that the perception of the human of what they are seeing is going to put that in a frame. They've asked it to do something. They're going to expect it to do something kind of reasonable. So there is a subjective opinion to what the AI's done. But we aren't consuming content and reading books to be able to be kind of instructed to do something with that. We're not a database. I'm not really sure what purpose this is for and why the AI would want to consume all this and what that would help to do. And this to me is illustrative of just a general arms race of AI where the buzzword is AI. The grant bodies want to fund AI. It's just a fun new thing to see how far we can go. And nobody's asking, should we go there? Should we do this? Is this reasonable? Is this appropriate? It's just a case of, well, how far can we take it? And that is an ethical issue. And Suleyman has spoken about ethics and communication before. But what he's doing here is kind of contrary to that. He's mixing up some very different complex concepts that are not comparable, and then going on to kind of disregard the ethics in what's actually happening here and what we should or shouldn't be doing. You can kind of look at cloning. We went as far as we did with that, and we're probably still researching it, just to see if we could. Can you clone a sheep? Should you clone a sheep? Should you be cloning things? Do you clone humans? Is that ethically reasonable to do so? The correct questions are not being asked here or answered. It's just a case of, yeah, of course we should do it, and the funding's there, so why not just try it? And the problem with this is that's all great until the untested or unvalidated or non-transparent IP protected program is put out into society and then it starts to cause societal damage. So you can see, suicides rising amongst teenagers and depression rising amongst teenagers. You can see, I think it was The Guardian that reported recently that fertility rates are dropping because of a number of factors, but one of them could be dating apps. People are finding it harder to meet other suitable partners because they aren't really mixing in communities anymore. They're using apps, they're more isolated in their existence, and it becomes more difficult to kind of live a normal life. So fertility rates are dropping. And what isn't looked at in this very much is the knock-on effects. So you can put out there all this stuff, but the problem is every time you make a change, you have a lot of knock-on consequences. So yeah, you might have an app out there that is a dating app, and you might think, yeah, that's a really good way for people to meet other people. And yes, sometimes it might be. But in other cases, it's not. And ethically, the examination of the effects of what you're doing is one of the primary activities that you should undertake before you even start this work. And that's what we do when I'm building models. Is this appropriate? Is it ethical? What are the risks? What could be the damage? How do we mitigate that? But again, if you're working for profit and you can spin PR at any level or at any point, then if you've got that big budget, then you might not care. You might just be able to just go ahead and say, well, even if we do get damage, we can just kind of sweep that under the carpet, or we can write it off as the user error, or we could say, well, oh, whoops, we'll just change that. And the regulation and legislation is not there, so there's nothing that can really be done anyway, and nothing's really gonna happen too badly. So we can just carry on, and if all else fails, we can just shut it down and we'll start something else similar somewhere else. Um, so the environment is just not there to facilitate building this ethical AI that keeps society safe at the minute. Let's go on to the next section. might be the last bit that I review because I think we're going into sales territory at this point. So we're making some very strong claims, factually accurate, infinitely knowledgeable, conversational interfaces, personal AI. That's a sales pitch to me. It's just saying this is what I'm going to be building, and what I'm doing here is I'm building up to the fact that I'm selling something, and I'm going to give you all the good words. I'm going to say communication, ethics. I'm really concerned with ethics, even though I'm not going to tell you anything about the ethics that I'm using. I'm not going to be transparent about my products. I'm not going to be transparent about what I'm building and how I'm selling that. But what I am going to do is tell you that this is a future and you need to get prepared for it. You need to shape it. You need to get on board with it because this is what's going to happen and this is what I'm selling you. And, if you listen to this and you agree with everything that he's saying, then you might be saying, yeah, this is great. I'm going to buy whatever solution this is that he's talking about because, he's doing a TED talk. He must know what he's talking about. Um, TED Talks are not the barometer for people that know what they're talking about. A lot of people that are actually experts in things, and obviously, again, we use that term loosely, aren't shoving their head above the parapet and shouting out about things because they don't want to get caught up in the hype or they just want to get on with their work. A lot of us just get on with it because we know that what we're building is useful. I mean, things like a textbook or a professional accreditation or training courses that are all approved and validated by large steering groups of partners in academia, industry, and government, which is what I do, is much more valuable to me than a TED Talk or a BBC interview or things like that because it makes a difference and it doesn't need to be shouted off the rooftops to make a difference because ultimately the value is in what you're doing and publishing the papers to understand that and to research that and to communicate with people about that is much more valuable to me than kind of going on social media and shouting out into the ether and the vacuum and giving social media more content to scrape that it could then manipulate or twist or do what it wants to do. Um, to me just doesn't make sense. So I don't really like to do talks anymore because of that. And I find it quite difficult to be working in this area sometimes where there's just a lot of talk and there's not a lot of do, and there's a lot of sales, and the sales come caveated with IP constraints and no transparency and no testing for robustness, no explanation of risks or mitigations. And I am very much of the conviction that should you build something, you should be following best practice, you should be looking at ethics, you should have the right team, the right amount of money, the right resource, the right time, answer the right questions, and make sure what you're doing is as safe as it possibly can be. Because where I work in the military, things are generally not supposed to be safe. They're supposed to be, war fighting things, but you can still be ethical within the way that you do war fighting. This isn't anything to do with that. This is personal AI conversational interfaces that still have not been expanded upon. I mean, Suleyman's got what, half an hour here to expand his point. He could have really talked to us about ethics, transparency, how he's working with his models, how these things are robust, but he chooses not to. He kind of segues from his opener, which starts going off that way, and then segues into sales. And that to me is just inauthentic and disingenuous because you're just using this talk for a sales pitch, which quite a lot of time will happen on panels or on stage talks where the aim is to kind of get across what it is that you're selling rather than to explain the actual facts and development behind it for people that are there to listen about that, but also for people that might be interacting with this so that they can do it in a safer manner. So then that leaves all of that space up to anyone that wants to take that up to try to then, after the product's been released, start shouting about the risks and the problems, at which point there's so much hype and people have listened to all these talks and watched these videos, they've established a level of trust and credibility, and now they're using the product and it's too late. We can see a lot of people are starting to kind of come off social media at the minute just because they're starting to understand what the risks are. But they have been on there for over a decade, maybe 2 decades, I think potentially they could have been on there, and their data's gone and the risks have been realised and they might yet to be realised. There's a lot of questions that we need to ask about that. What happens to accounts when people die? What happens to the IP that the person has there? There's lots and lots of different things that you might want to look at there. Do police have access to this stuff? If you said something weird on Facebook, can that be brought into a court case? You might have said something with a different meaning, but because it's in words, it might not have come across in the right way that you meant it to do, and that could then be used against you. There's lots of different questions that have just never been asked, and it's all been kind of put out there as a fun little tool that is really nice and enables you to communicate with people. But the whole deeper level of risk within that has kind of very rarely, if ever, been delved into and discussed. So I hope you like that reaction video of this TEDx talk. If you want me to review any other videos, I'm quite happy to do. So please, in the comments below, let me know if there's anything else you want me to look at. In the meantime, you can look at my papers. I'll put the link below for my published papers, and you can sign up to the newsletter as well. And if you would like to like and subscribe, that would be excellent. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time.